These are the Fibralo Brush pens. Now I tried these out a few months ago and there were 15 in the range and I really enjoyed them, but some of these colours just aren't my kind of colours. So I was really excited to hear that they've introduced 15 new colours into their Caran d'Ache Fibralo brush range, doubling it basically, and I have some of them here to test out today. So hello if you're new here, my name's Katie, I'm a full-time sketchbook artist and I do use a lot of mixed media, including brush pens within my sketchbook work. So I'm going to talk about the Fibralo brush pens on their own because they are 2-in-1 markers because you can use them with water. But what I liked about these were the range of colours. Now if you've been on my channel before, you'll know that I don't recommend buying multi-sets. Often there are going to be shades in there that you're never going to use and there'll be really bright ones that just won't get touched. Whereas buying a curated set like this, I think is a much better option if you're not able to buy them open stock. You can buy them in sets of 10, 15, 24 and 30 colours, but I think these themed sets are the way to go. So we're going to test them today. So these are 4 of the new Fibralo brush colour themes. There are 6 in total, so the ones I don't have is the manga and the pastel set, but these ones are definitely up my street. These were kindly sent to me by Jacquard International, so a big shout out to them. I absolutely love drawing landscapes, so the botanic one will be perfect for that. I'm really intrigued by some of the brown and more neutral tones for the portraits. I'll be doing that in a landscape theme, so we'll see how that carries across. We've got the marine one, which is going to be perfect for some oceanscapes, and of course bloom, which will be great for a flower field. I actually think these are going to be really usable. I think these are way more accessible than buying even this 15 set with all of the different colours, or the 30 set now they've doubled the range. I think these themed sets, they're much more curated, and I think based on what you create, they make a lot more sense. I think everyone is going to be usable, but let's see if that's actually true. So just a little look at the brush pens if you've not seen these before. As I said, these are the Fibralo brushes by Caran d'Ache. They are now 100% recycled as well, using ocean-bound plastic that was collected and processed before reaching the sea, so I really like that. And we're going to start with swatching the botanic set. So the nibs are smaller than my Tombos or my Ecoline brush pens, but there's really nice flexibility in them that, I'm able to get a big swathe of colour down while still keeping that rigidness of the tip for finer details, and you'll see that later on when I do some art with them. So you can see here the colours for the botanic set, especially those first two, the 230 and the 220, were much brighter than I expected. So definitely not the sort of neutral greens that I prefer, and definitely much more vivid than I thought they would be, especially based on the packaging. So something to bear in mind, but I find that with all brush pens. And I'm going to show you as well here, so this is the portrait set, which I wasn't super keen on because I don't tend to do much portraits, but you'll see that I'm going to use it for a landscape, and actually this one became one of my favourite sets. This is a good example with the lid, so you can see it's much brighter on the lid than it swatches, and sometimes it works the other way around, like the ones above where they were so much brighter and I thought they would be a bit more muted. Now this one also has the 033 and the 065 like the set above, so I wouldn't say you'd need both of them because you will get duplicates. So I would recommend picking your favourite based on maybe this video and seeing which one you prefer. Next up is the marine set, so again I'm going to show you the colours as they swatch out. Now I think this is really helpful when you are buying any colours of any supply to check swatches online. It's why I love YouTube videos and just looking on Google Images to see what the colours are actually like. So you can see here we do have a lot of different blues here. Now all of these were pretty vibrant, which I was expecting. The 171 I think looked a little bit more muted on the packaging. It will always look different on the packaging than what they actually come out like, so if you are able to swatch them then I think it's helpful. But like I said, there's so much information on the internet, I think that's worth it too. And then lastly onto the bloom set. Now there is just one green in this set, which is this 1249, which is definitely my favourite kind of green. It's much more olivey and it pairs with some of these brighter pinks and purples beautifully. I really love this set, much more than I expected to, so I really am looking forward to showing you what I create with this one. But I wish there was maybe a darker tone of green in this set because I think then it would be pretty perfect for me. So here's an overview of the colours and the swatches you can see there. It's a really good range of colours, but you can definitely see a few duplicates, but definitely vibrant and really punchy, which I do think stands out for these. Here I'm just showing you the packaging so you can see the differences, especially that 230, which I was expecting to be much more yellow toned, and then just a quick overview, that 171 definitely not as green toned, but worth bearing in mind, and hopefully this is helpful when you're making decisions if you want to buy a set. Okay, so on to some drawings. So I've set my page out to have 4 panels, starting with the Botanic set, and I'm using the Caran d'Ache water brushes and also working in the Etcher Lamated Edition Perfect Sketchbook. Now, one thing I really love about the Fibralo brushes is that they do work really well with water, and I love that you can play around with techniques. I'm just showing you, I really had a hang up about that green. I was disappointed it wasn't more yellow. So I'm trying to mix it in with that ochre, but because they are water activated, I think that makes it much more usable. So you can see here I'm coming in with my water brush pen and I can create a much more varied set of colours and opacity because I'm adding that water to them. So I definitely recommend using these on paper that can handle the water. I wouldn't do this in my Royal Talon sketchbook. I would pick one where it's, mixed media or watercolour paper, especially the smooth ones. I think that kind of paper will really let these Fibralo brush pens shine. So you can see I layer things up just to try and get that variation. Now obviously 6 colours is quite a small amount of shades to create a full picture, but it's amazing the variety that you can actually create, especially when you're overlaying different colours like I am there to create, a bit more of that gradient and then coming in with the water as well to smudge things out. I prefer that because I do tend to like the more muted greens, but this is another option as well, is dabbing the water brush pen to the tip of the felt tip pen and then applying it that way, and I think that is a really nice effect to create distance. So you can see I'm doing that here for the suggestion of trees in the background, and then when I want it to be really opaque and, adding more tone and adding a darker value to that tree trunk, then I could layer them on top really nicely for creating some of this suggestion of shadow. I will leave a link to all of the references down below as well in the description of this video, but I'm finishing this one off by swatching the colours at the bottom. Okay, onto the portrait set now. So like I said, portraits are not really my thing, so I'm going to stick with my comfort zone and actually see what we can create for a landscape scene. So again, I'm trying to create depth and distance here, so I'm using some of the water just to push back some of the colour here this is the lightest one in the set, which is 541. I mean, it's still not super light. I think that's just what happens with brush pens. Sometimes it's hard to get more of the lighter tones, so I think the fact that I can use water with these so easily is definitely a big win. I really like this shade of pink. I think it's a really nice soft pink. It's not too red either, so I like that one, and I do think this one is probably the set that feels the easiest to use in the fact that, they all sit nicely together, they feel very analogous together, and I do like that I can pair these together without thinking, so I don't have to curate this limited set myself with any of these because I know that they will work. I do also like that there's a really big range of value here from the lighter tones to the darker tones, although I didn't actually use the 009 here because I don't tend to use black in my work. I tend to use the dark brown, which you can see I've used here. Now I did find it hard not to add in any other materials or any other colours. I use a lot of materials basically, so using limited palettes isn't usual for me. So this was a really good challenge, and it does teach me that I can do it, especially because I am using lots of different techniques and effects to really make the most of them. I can layer things on top to create different colours. I can change the amount of water that I apply. I can, really have a play with these, and I think that's where a lot of our creativity and excitement can come from. Like I mentioned in last week's video, where we can play and find our joy when we just let ourselves do that, when we can experiment and not try and create perfect work. Okay, so onto the marine set. Now, I don't do much water scenes, so I was a little bit apprehensive for this one because there are none of my favourite greens or my neutral tones at all in this set, just blues and a grey. So what I decided to do was to push myself and try something different and do a full-on ocean scene. So I started with some of the bigger shapes, and now I'm applying the brush pen direct to the nib of my brush, and then applying that to the paper, and that stops things from being super vibrant. I do try and go on top of the water, but it's definitely made it a bit more subtle. So I think that works really nicely when I don't want a really dark effect. This creates a really nice softness, and I added some water straight to the page there so I could really get that subtle gradient effect because I didn't want the sky to overpower this one. I still wanted it to feel really clean and fresh, and also to have the waves, which you'll see I'm going to add on in the bottom, to be the main focus. So I haven't tried this technique before. This is not in my comfort zone in terms of drawing waves like this, so I was completely making this up on the fly and just hoping for the best. But I really wanted to use the colours here, so using the 171 and the 211 and trying to get that effect of the light on the water. It is a very complicated reference, so as always I did have to simplify, and again to try and get some of that depth I did soften it at the back and just applied the water, and there's a bit less layering here, but I still used some of the effects the best way that I could. Here I am layering on top, and I think again that creates a different colour, and I'm trying to show the depth of the water here. Now I think I preferred it before I added on these layers, but I still had a lot of fun, and it's good to push ourselves and try something different. So although this one is very, very out my comfort zone, it was still fun to try and play around with. I did enjoy doing some of these swirly effects. I think this is where I was kind of losing it a little bit, but I did like adding on that little boat, and I feel like this one still gets the vibe that I wanted. It feels very fresh, and you can still tell it is the ocean scene. It's just something that I probably need a bit more practice on. And last but not least, we are on to the bloom set. So like I said earlier, this one I was most surprised by, but I absolutely loved it. Now this is kind of a landscape alongside some flowers because I knew I wanted to really use some of these brighter tones in this set to my advantage. Again, I'm really simplifying the reference and simplifying the flower shapes. We've got some tulips here. I also simplified the ones below to basically just be circles. But I was very happy to have this specific shade of green in this set because, like I said, it is one of my favourite shades. It's very olive toned, and I think paired with a lighter version of this, I think would be perfect. But I do love how it works with some of the vibrant colours, so with the pink and the yellow. And then we've got the darkest value in the set, which is the red, which you'll see I'll use later. Now because I wanted that softer green, and obviously this set didn't come with it, I did have to merge them together, and I was able to wet the green and soften it down with a bit of the yellow to really create that different value. And I really love that. I think that softness adds a little bit more atmosphere and intrigue to this one. So it was a perfect way to really be able to fill out this scene without actually reaching for another pen. Generally, that's how I work. I would always reach for another supply when I'm looking for something. But these sets really made me use what I have and be a bit more experimental instead of just reaching for some of my many supplies. And I think that's a really good thing. I think it's something that we should do more often. So I really like that this stretched me creatively. And, I was able to create all these different scenes with these 6 colours for each. And I was pleasantly surprised. I really loved how this effect worked as well. So this wasn't intentional, it was just something I was playing around with, and I worked out that I could soften that out and create this sort of much more muted grey tone with the purple over the green. So I used that to create the depth of the trees in the distance, and that was by accident. I didn't actually plan for that. So sometimes just playing really does lead to the best results, and I really loved the depth that created with this one, and it still shocks me that this one was just 6 colours. You can see I used some of the red in the background and also for the details on the flowers here. And again, just layering up some of the colours, so the purple on top of the purple, just to create a slightly darker tone, so even the same colour can create lots of different values there. I'm just going to label these up with the names of each set, but I'd love to know which one was your favourite down below in the comments. I am really impressed with the water-based ink because it really did mean that just having the 6 colours in each, I could still do plenty of different techniques and colours within them. I love the atmosphere of the landscape I did with the portrait set, but I think my favourite is the bloom set. I really wish there was a more yellow-toned green for that first one because that would generally be my go-to, so I was pleasantly surprised that I loved so many of the other sets as well. Do you create artwork with limited colour palettes, or maybe this has inspired you, hopefully, to play and experiment with some limited sets and try your hand at experimenting with water and layering and seeing what other shades you can create? I'll leave a link to the Fibralo brush pens down below, and a huge thank you to Jack Art International and Karen Dash for sending these to try out. I'd love to hear what you think, and I hope you have a creative week ahead. I will see you all next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later!